Welcome to the Inside UMSL podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and I'm joined today with Dr. Mike Nichols, Professor of Chemistry and Biochemistry at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Hello. How you doing today, Mike?
Hi, Nate. Great to be here.
Good. I'm happy to have you. I'm excited to just dive in and get to know more of your story and what you do here. So let's kick it off with your background. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Virginia, lived there for a while when I was a small child, but eventually my family moved out to the St. Louis area. So I consider myself growing up in St. Louis. But of course, in science, we end up taking a pretty interesting journey. So I've lived in a lot of other places, but finished high school here in St. Louis, went to university away and majored in chemistry.
Okay.
And then decided to pursue a PhD at Purdue University in Indiana. And that was in chemistry and biochemistry, and then did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, prior to coming to the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
What made you choose chemistry?
Well, it's a good question because I've always been interested in all of the different sciences. So I was interested in biology, physics, and chemistry. But I did really well in chemistry in school. I did pretty well in the other subjects too, but for some reason chemistry kind of stuck with me. But the other interests stayed with me the whole time. And I'm sure we'll chat later, but my interest now research-wise involves all three of those disciplines.
And so what was your journey academically then? You said you studied at Purdue and Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that you were studying throughout your time before you got here to UMSL?
Yeah, so you have to really narrow your focus when you decide to do a PhD. And so what I chose was a lab that was studying neurochemistry.
Okay.
Because I was very interested in biochemistry, but also how that works in the brain. And so my lab in graduate school worked with neurons, and I studied several enzymes in the neurons that were involved in neurotransmitter processes. And so I kept with that theme when I went to do my postdoc, and that's where I really got introduced to Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases.
So what initially drew you to jumping into neurochemistry and Alzheimer's as opposed to any other specific field of study?
Well, I think it always has to do with your experiences. And so friends and family members that had some issues with, how their brain was working and processing. And so I was interested in trying to understand what causes those kinds of things. And ultimately, it's all about what motivates you and what your interest is in. And I thought the brain, and it still is kind of the unknown frontier out there, biochemically, as I should say.
What makes it different from what you were studying in your postdoc? What are the differences, maybe?
So in my postdoc, and here's where the other disciplines come in, was mainly biophysical. And so maybe I should give a little background on Alzheimer's disease, but there's two proteins that accumulate in the brains of AD patients. The first one that starts is called the amyloid beta protein. The second one that is triggered by the first one is the tau protein. They both form these plaques and tangles in the brain. So they're in this aggregated form, even though we all produce these proteins every day. Some people, they begin to accumulate later in life. So how those proteins form this structure that accumulates in the brain has to do with biophysics. So that's what I did at the Mayo Clinic, and it was strictly that, although the last couple years I started my own program working on the cellular side of that and how these things are killing neurons or causing inflammation in the brain. So my lab, since I've been here, is really focused on this amyloid beta protein. Again, we've kept up the biophysics, but trying to understand how it causes inflammation in the brain. And we use a lot of cell model systems in our lab, and we're considered biochemists, and so I say that we're studying the basic biochemistry of Alzheimer's disease. We don't work with any patients, but we try to tease out a lot of the things that are going wrong in Alzheimer's disease that ultimately leads to the real problems and the dementia that you see in patients.
And you keep saying we. Is we specifically just you and other faculty, or are students involved in this as well?
Well, that's a great question, because I think hopefully I want to talk a little bit about the university as a whole.
Yeah.
But my research lab utilizes students at all levels. So of course we have people working on their PhD, but we are also using master's students in the labs and lots of undergraduate researchers.
Wow.
So those undergraduates come from chemistry and biochemistry, biochemistry and biotechnology, or straight biology programs. So all of those students can actually get credit for doing research in a lab, plus having this great experience and getting more background in research. So when I say we, it is definitely a whole team project. And the undergraduates come in, and well, even the master's and PhD students, and they have very little exposure to this type of research, and we just pass it on. We train everybody and keep them in the lab for 2 or 3 semesters. Of course, the PhD students are there for usually 5 years or so.
Wow.
So they will help mentor all the other students in the lab.
And for the undergraduate students, this isn't something like coming in and cleaning test tubes, which at other institutions it might be like the lower level menial labor.
No, well, all of us do the menial stuff too, including me.
Yeah.
That's important to keep the lab up and make sure we have everything we need. But we share those duties, and every student that does research in the lab ends up on a project and contributes quite a bit if they can put in, 3 semesters or so in the lab.
Yeah.
So many of those guys have gone on to graduate school, medical school, or straight into industry working, and that research experience has helped.
Are students involved in the grant writing process?
Not as much. That usually falls on my shoulders, but they, in many cases, are generating the data that we use to write grant proposals. And you have to have that data and some of those early findings to get the money for that. So even that is a team effort, but I'm usually the one writing the proposals.
Now, it seems like from everything you've explained that UMSL is a very hands-on focused research institution. How is that something that enhances the experience of the faculty and students here?
I mean, it really sets us apart because we are the primary public research institution in the St. Louis area. Now, there's a lot of institutional research going on, of course, Washington University, St. Louis University. They're private schools. We're a public university, and it's part of our mission, and we want everyone to know about that, and we want to recruit students that are interested in doing research with their degree programs. But the research really helps our degree programs. So most of the professors are not only teaching courses, but they're doing research and trying to stay up to date on all of the cutting edge strategies. And so the students that are taking our courses will benefit from that, in addition to having the potential to work in a research lab.
That seems like a huge advantage.
It's a big advantage. And when you're interviewing for a job, after you finish, they're going to ask about research and whether you had the opportunity to do any.
So what would you say are some of the key advantages for students who are choosing to come to UMSL over going to another university?
Well, there's lots of options. So I mentioned a lot of degree programs. So even within the chemistry program, you can do biochem emphasis. You can emphasize other disciplines like organic or inorganic. The biology department has lots of options as well, just for degree programs. So different types of biology degrees. And then those two departments jointly run the biochemistry and biotechnology program, which also has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And I'm the current director of that program.
Wow.
So that's run by two different departments that work together for that full degree program. So there are lots of options if you want to come here to study science.
Kind of like a science smorgasbord.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of different things. Every one of those degree programs has options for research. I mean, I haven't mentioned physics, but they're right there in the science complex. And so a lot of cool things that we all work together on. And
So there's a lot of connections within campus itself. Are there any connections that are built between maybe industry in St. Louis or the community at large?
there is. I'm actually the organizer and the liaison for our industrial advisory board for the chemistry and biochemistry department. And so we have all the major companies that sit on this board, plus some of the medium-sized companies. And we'll be getting together in the next couple of months. We get together twice a year. And so all the companies tell us what they think students should learn or study while they're in school. And we try to adapt our programs based on their feedback.
So it's like you guys are adjusting everything to make it easier for students to be successful in their path after.
I mean, a lot of people go into industry. So, I mean, I mentioned grad school and academia and medical school, and we've got plenty that have gone to med school and are out practicing now. But I would say the large majority goes into industry.
Wow.
Whether it's chemical, biochemical, biological. So, of course, we have many, many graduates at all of these companies from our programs. So they are telling us how we can tweak things a little bit and get better at it.
To better prepare students for what's coming after.
Yep.
So when it comes to partnering with the surrounding area, the community, St. Louis at large, are there any internships available for students?
Yeah, so definitely. And one of the things that I wanted to mention with our industrial advisory board is we utilize all these companies as communication to let us know about all the internships that are coming up. In fact, we're in talks now with one of the major companies here in St. Louis about setting up a co-op program, which would be even more than an internship. But typically the ones that we try to encourage and let all of our students know about are the summer internships, and those are extremely valuable as well.
That's cool. Yeah. So to bounce back to the Alzheimer's research, are there any developments or breakthroughs that make you most hopeful about finding treatments?
We're cautiously optimistic, and the reason I say that is because for 30 years, many researchers have been pounding away at Alzheimer's disease and trying to understand more about the disease, and the goal is always to develop a therapy. So there's plenty of medicines that you can take as a AD patient that don't necessarily stop the disease, but they'll buy you some time while the medicines treat some of the symptoms of dementia. In the last 2 to 3 years, there have been some monoclonal antibodies that have been approved by the FDA, and at least one of those is now being administered to patients. So these antibodies are the first things that actually attack the disease process. Those antibodies are directed towards that amyloid beta protein that my lab studies. And so they will slow the cognitive decline. So it's not perfect right now, but it's the first thing that actually is treating the progression of the disease.
Wow.
So I think it's going to take a combination of things, but we're starting to have a little crack there of potential therapeutics in the future. One of the other areas that they're really working on is diagnostics, because a lot of the things that I mentioned about the accumulation of these proteins in the brain occur well before you have dementia.
Yeah.
So things are happening for probably 10 years or longer. So what everyone is working on is how can you detect who might be getting Alzheimer's disease and detect this at an early stage. So those are also starting to make some breakthroughs. One is you have to withdraw cerebrospinal fluid, which is very invasive and painful. But the one that everyone is working towards is a blood test.
Okay.
And there's several papers just this last year
Wow.
that have come out with some promising blood tests, looking at a combination of the amyloid beta protein and this tau protein. So it's all kind of related to those two proteins.
Wow.
Now, we're fortunate here at UMSL. I mean, we do a lot of our own work, but of course, Washington University Med School has a large Alzheimer's disease research program and center. So we're down there all the time at seminars, symposiums, trying to collaborate with people, talking about Alzheimer's disease, sharing ideas. So it really is not just a smaller team effort, but a large team effort.
It's almost like coming here to UMSL connects you to the larger group working towards the goal of figuring out how to
that's
conquer AD.
Yeah, that's what we try to do. Try to connect everyone, teach everyone, make some progress ourselves, and make some contributions to hopefully solving this problem.
That would be really amazing.
And it's not just Alzheimer's. There's a lot of other neurodegenerative diseases that are very closely related to Alzheimer's disease.
And are those things that students are also able to hop in and study alongside?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I teach a course here for the graduate students that specifically focuses on protein aggregation and neurodegenerative diseases. So we'll talk about ALS, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, prion diseases.
Yeah.
So whole variety of diseases in that class, and we'll kind of look at the biochemical basis of that.
Wow.
That's only for graduate students, but we always try to talk about these things in the undergraduate courses as well.
That's really cool. That's the big block of questions to kind of get your background and your story. Now it's time to just find out a little bit more about what you do with your free time.
Okay.
So
free time. What's that?
So let's imagine free time.
Right. No, it's always important to make some free time, and I wrestled in college.
Really?
Yeah. So Division II, UMSL is Division II.
Okay.
I can't wrestle anymore, but lots of friends that are coaching wrestling. We get back together all the time. But in general, wrestling taught me perseverance, grittiness, never giving up, because research, a lot of times things fail.
Yeah.
And so you have to just get back at it, figure out what went wrong, and just keep going and not let it get you down. But the other thing is I always try to exercise.
Yeah.
So the exercising helps me thinking, and it kind of mellows me out so I can, face whatever obstacles or challenges that we have. And I do that in a variety of ways. I ride my bike on the Katy Trail.
Wow.
Which runs along the Missouri River here in St. Louis. Do that several times a week and run on the treadmill and listen to music.
I have a question.
So-
You get a chance to go out to eat in St. Louis. Where's the first place you're going to grab a bite?
Always go down to the Hill.
Okay.
So the Hill, I mean, everyone in St. Louis knows about it, is the Italian section of St. Louis.
Yeah.
And has a long history, probably 20, 30 top-notch restaurants. Great place to go.
You just go to the Hill, throw a rock.
Go to
in
the Hill,
where it
and
lands,
there's
you're gonna
lots
eat.
of restaurants to choose from.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So good Italian food.
good Italian food.
Perfect. So I've got three easy questions,
Yeah.
little softballs. The first one is, what's one book, movie, or TV show you think everyone should experience?
Oh boy. So let's see. Movie. I mean, I'm going to be old school here. So top one is Shawshank Redemption.
Great choice.
So I read a lot of Stephen King books growing up. Many people don't know that Shawshank was
Stephen
a
King?
short story by Stephen King. But I love the movie The Sting. Robert Redford, Paul
That's
Newman.
One of my all-time favorite movies.
But I can go on and on. I mean, I love movies.
Good.
And there's many that if it pops up, I'll just stop and start watching it.
Yeah.
So books were Stephen King. I read a lot of fiction. So I know people read a lot of nonfiction.
Yeah.
But when I'm reading, I'm reading fiction books.
Is there like a specific genre?
Well, I think one of my favorites is David Baldacci books.
Yeah.
So those, I've read every one of them. So I'm always waiting for a new one to come out.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of legal thrillers. Not quite John Grisham.
Yeah.
A little bit more spy stuff as
Yeah.
well. But Baldacci books, love those.
Next question is, if you could spend a day as a student in any other department, what would it be?
You know what? I would kind of like to hang out with the philosophy guys. I want to see what they're doing and what they're talking about. And I hear from the ones that are doing some neuroscience related stuff, but that would be kind of fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice that someone said to you recently that's been kind of shaping how you're doing things?
Well, this is one thing I wanted to mention because what you're saying in general is, you know, passing something down to you, and I try to pass that down to other people, and that's all about mentorship. So in science, it's a big thing because you just can't do it on your own. You have to learn from somebody else, and then you have to in turn pass that on to somebody else. And that's what we do. So if you come in as an undergraduate, you don't have to know everything. You just have to have the motivation and the interest in science. And somebody will bring you along and teach you. And then you'll make another step forward, and then someone else will teach you something else. And what you think is impossible, when you take little steps to get there, you're going to look back and say, wow, I went a long way. But it was those little steps that got you there. So what is always told to me, and what was recently told to me, is always appreciate the people that you have around you and listen to them and use them as a support system. That could be in your field of work, or it could be your friends or family. But that was reaffirmed to me just recently.
Wow.
So it's important, for everything that you do as a person.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really love
Glad to
getting to
do
hear
it.
your story. It was awesome.
Sure.